Welcome to the Keto Geek podcast. Let's do this.
Health, nutrition, fitness, low-carb lifestyle.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Keto Geek podcast. This episode will be awesome. But before we get into Robert Sikes, aka Ketosavage, who is our main featured guest for the show, I wanted to delve a little bit into our product, which is the energy pods. Some of you people had messaged me on Instagram or emailed me asking me a little bit more detail about the product as a whole. So I decided to reach out to our great alchemist, aka Corey, who basically does all our production and everything behind the stage for Keto Geek. And he's with me in our studio. So Corey, welcome aboard. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you, Fahad?
I am doing fantastic. Let's give people some information about who you are and how you got into keto, which I guess is the first question. How did you get into keto?
Well, I got into keto because of mutual interest with those I practiced yoga with, including yourself and another individual, Dorian. He's on a Keto Geek podcast as well, one of the first. And I have always been experimental with what I put into my body and how I take on physical activity. And I treat myself as a laboratory. So I haven't tried keto. Might as well.
Yes. And I believe you started off as a vegetarian keto, didn't you?
I did.
What happened?
Well, first month or so, it felt pretty good. I noticed the benefits of being able to burn fats, but then I noticed a shortage in my choice of foods, which were very limited to my protein intake, was a lot of yogurt and eggs, and I got very tired of those things. And also, I noticed my energy started to bonk around the middle of the day, and I didn't feel good. So I introduced a chicken salad, God forbid. And I noticed that it didn't kill me. So then I started hanging out with Fahad some more, and we got some delicious beef, and I felt really good. And then I became addicted.
And now you're practically part of the Church of Carnivory by now. Yeah. Like many of the people in our community, which is really interesting. So how did you actually become part of Keto Geek? We're going to tell people that story as well.
Yeah, I got into Keto Geek because I have a very big interest in cooking, first of all. That's the base here. And I noticed Fahad had a really cool product going on. He was sampling it out to our yoga family, mainly comprised of women in our yoga studio, which he says is the perfect demographic to test that out on. I agree. And I was interested. I was like, what do you put in this? He's like, I put ghee. I'm like, I know what ghee is. I know how to make ghee. Let's do this. So he needed some help in the kitchen, and I noticed what could be fixed and what could be improved, and we went on from there.
Yes, and you were the one who picked like these various kinds of butters from all over the place. Let's explain to the people what the process was and how you came to the conclusion to deducing the specific butter from straws that we used.
Yeah, so this was a very crazy process that I got to share with Fahad. It was a lot of fun. We went to Whole Foods initially and didn't know where to start, so we started everywhere. We picked up all of the butter that was available, not just one type, but one of each, just about. Started playing around. We did about, I think the first day, we did 4 butters at once, and we used one method as a control, and saw very different results. We noticed that the butters with high butterfat content had the most flavor and turned out to have like more of a caramel flavor in the end. And it also, we had a higher yield, which was really nice. We ended up landing on 2. We were torn between Humboldt Creamery and Strauss. They're both local to us. Humboldt was a little bit further away, but we went with Strauss because we in the end really liked the flavor it produced, as some of you have tried already.
Yes, and they're actually local to us. Practically, I think they're like 30, 45 minutes away from us in Petaluma, California. And they have some really good farming ethics, and they're working on some great projects. And I think they're also doing some regenerative farming as well. So what about the energy pods? You developed one of the products for us, which was the pecan coconut version. And so overall, how did you come up with that recipe, and what's been your strategy behind the scenes at Keto Geek?
Yeah, this, so to touch on pecan coconuts, this recipe came about because someone told me about coconut butter, which I've never heard of. I thought there was only coconuts and coconut oil and not the butter. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So we picked some up and we were prototyping in the kitchen one day for a new flavor. And I decided to just start putting ingredients in my mouth. So I put pecan, coconut butter, and a little bit of ghee at the same time. And a pinch of salt, I remember. That was delicious. And I remember having you try it, and you kind of freaked out about it as well. So we went with it, and that's kind of our process. We like to just choose the best ingredients that we can find in the country through our research with the people we've listened to on podcasts and what is the best for our bodies. And we just mash all of that together into the energy pod. And that's pretty much our general process here.
Yeah. Any other projects that you would like to focus on at Ketogeek as far as the food products are concerned?
Yes. We are very interested in playing with dry-aged beef products, namely called biltong, but we want to call it dry-aged beef because that sounds really cool. We're looking into doing that pretty soon, so keep your heads up.
Yeah, we've taken the plunge and kind of announced it in several different places. I don't know if I've announced it in our podcast, but that's going to be our product. And we have our unique ways of preparing different things. In fact, I think our ghee making process is slightly different from everybody else. So how's it different, by the way?
I have to give my secrets right away.
No, we don't have to. But I think we both remember sitting down one day and just trying to find as much scientific literature as possible on how to make ghee and all the temperature sensitivities and how everything.
We even tried different music while making the ghee.
Like as if that's going to make a huge difference. Like the Ayurvedic chant and all that kind of stuff. I think now we've converted, as far as the chants are concerned, we have switched to, Foxy Lady by Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, it seems to be the best. It produced the most sexy ghee ever.
Do you have anything else you want to add and share with our Keto Geek family? And I'm going to keep bringing you on board as people ask us more questions about Keto Geek and all the products that we make. So please have at it.
Yeah, absolutely. We at Keto Geek, we want to make the best sort of products that you can enjoy in your day. Something that's just very easy to grab and that is guilt-free as long as you don't consume the entire box. That might make you feel a little funny, but we just want to make these products and make the world a better place by starting here locally.
Awesome. Well, Corey, thank you so much for sharing this little snippet. And if you guys and gals have more questions, please throw them my way and we'll bring back Corey and have them addressed. We both do a live stream on Instagram every Sunday at about 10 a.m. And you can have a direct conversation with both of us at that time. So yeah, once again, Corey, you've been awesome.
Thanks for having me, Fad.
Let's go back to our show, which is with Robert Sikes, aka Ketosavage, who's been an amazing person that I've been following on Instagram and watching some of his YouTube content. He's participated in several bodybuilding competitions. He's a go-getter sort of dude, and he's one of the good people in the keto sphere. He's done it all. His style is a little different than many of the people who are in the keto sphere as far as bodybuilding and fat loss is concerned, but I really respect this guy, and I'm just gonna let him describe himself, and let's get into the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our show with Robert Sikes, aka Ketosavage. Ladies and germs and gentlemen and everybody else, we have Robert Sikes on board with us, more commonly known as Ketosavage. First of all, how are you?
Man, I am great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure for me to have you on board. As soon as I saw your Instagram feed, I knew you had to come on board eventually at our podcast. You seem one of those really genuine and real people, and I really respect that, so thank you so much for being on board. But here's a question. Savage? Why Savage?
That's a good question. So when I started the business and the brand, like I had like this piece of paper with a whole bunch of initial name ideas written down, and Savage stuck out for a couple of reasons. One, before even I got into fitness, like I took a big interest in like Native American history, like the savages and whatnot. So that was kind of one that was unrelated to fitness or anything. But the main overarching theme, I think, is I want to just bring people back, like the primitive, raw performance, like just going savagery, while also kind of maintaining an air of, scientific approach. So I don't know, it's kind of abstract, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. And so what happened? How did you get into keto?
So kind of by accident, I have a bodybuilding background. I always kind of followed a typical bro dieting perspective when it came to nutrition and competing. And then I did carbohydrate backloading after one of my latest competitions. And basically that's just backloading all of your carbs for the latter part of the day. And I noticed that I felt better before I ever introduced the carbs. So I just figured I'd remove them entirely and see what happened. And lo and behold, I fell into keto by accident doing that.
Yeah. So what did you notice? Like, I would imagine that in the bodybuilding community, correct me if I'm wrong, but they say, oh, keto is dangerous. It could kill you long term. Was that something you faced?
Yeah, I got a lot of pushback when I started doing, keto in the bodybuilding community. I've been keto for like 3 years, and when I decided I was going to compete this last go around and just maintain keto all the way through the off season, the competition prep, the peak week, the post show, all of my fellow bodybuilders say I would never be able to get that lean with that high fat intake. They said that I would have to have carbs to be able to fill out and build muscle, and I just said, okay, well, we'll see, and I beat them all. So.
Yeah. So what happened? When was this? When did this competition happen, and what was the narrative behind it?
So basically, my last, so I've done, I may have that in now, 5 total, and the first 3 were all, following typical bro dieting. These last 2 were with keto. I went pro on these last 2, and basically, I decided to just maintain the ketogenic diet all the way through. Which was kind of even more backstory with the typical bro dieting perspective. Basically, you wind up, cutting your fats down really low, and you kind of cycle your carbs and your proteins stay high. It's just a very inefficient way to go about it from a health longevity standpoint. Like everybody just walks around like zombies there towards the end. Whereas with me keeping my fats high and kind of making protein my most manipulated variable and bringing that down much lower. The week before I stepped on stage, I was at 65 grams of protein, which is completely, counter to what everybody else was doing at around 300 grams of protein. So I kind of was a very stark contrast there. And then a lot changed with regard to kind of like peak week strategies and just what I was eating backstage compared to everybody else. Everybody else had like their rice cakes and, jams and jellies, and I was back there with fat bombs. And I was able to fill out on stage and look sharper and get leaner and feel better than the other competitors. It was pretty crazy. It surprised me even.
Did you have any books or person that influenced you to get into keto, or were you just looking online?
No, I didn't really have I once I started doing some research, I kind of figured out, mostly looking at the, keto is used, in the 20s for epileptic children and whatnot. So I kind of stumbled upon that and kind of like the scientific research around it. But there wasn't really any bodybuilders in the space that I could find that were doing it. So it was honestly more just like trial and error. I'm sure there's others that have done it with success. Vince Giron did something similar, kind of like the steak and eggs diet way back when, but I don't know if that was, technically in ketosis or not. But I didn't have any other bodybuilders that I was looking to for, answers or specifics. I just kind of self-tested mostly.
Got it. So that's quite a journey for you. And you started a YouTube channel. When did that begin?
So after I basically quit my job and kind of jumped ship, even more backstory here, and didn't have a clue what I was going to do. So I figured I'd get into health and fitness. That's always been my passion. And I was watching a bunch of Gary Vaynerchuk, YouTube videos and listening to his podcast. And he's all about, documenting and, creating content and getting out there. And so I decided, okay, well, I'm going to start me a YouTube channel. So I started doing that with, my cell phone as the camera. And I did most of the recording in my closet with like a black blanket as the backdrop. Totally clueless as to what I was doing. My audio sucked. My lighting sucked. Everything sucked. Yeah, I just kind of taught myself how to do that starting about 2 years ago now. I think I put out my first video.
Yeah. And now
Journey for sure.
Yeah, now you've grown up quite a bit. And now you get to talk in different places, which is really cool. I'm really happy that you're gaining some solid traction here, and I'm so glad that the keto is not just getting ignored by everybody else. So let's talk about your diet in general. Do you follow like a slightly different version of keto, or what kind of keto? Like, there's so many ketos now.
Yeah, so that's there is so many ketos now. You got like your cyclical, you got your strict, you got your targeted keto, and I think like people ask me about this a lot. You know, they ask me like, what's the best strategy, and I've got kind of a differing approach than a lot of people in that. Since I've been in ketosis for 3 years, like there's different phases of adaptation. Like the person that's adapted for a week is going to feel different and perform different than the person that's been in ketosis for 3 years. And it just keeps getting better and better and better. And I've stayed strict keto that whole time, not having a carb meal in that 3 years. And I think a lot of the argument for, you know, cyclical keto or targeted keto, you know, is more relevant for people that aren't as adapted. But once you've been adapted for, you know, years, your body truly does learn how to efficiently use fats, you know, superior to carbs. So like I get a better pump, I perform better, I feel better, I've got more mental clarity, totally absent of carbs. So I keep my total carb intake down below about 20 grams a day. And I keep my fat ratio around 78 to 82%.
Okay. And do you measure by weight, or do you how do you track your food intake?
So I used to never use a food scale, but I've learned to kind of get pretty familiar with it, and it's pretty intuitive now. So I'll use a food scale, and then I use My Macros Plus as my macro tracker app. And I mean, kind of the bodybuilder mentality of me, like I don't like to have to think about what I'm eating so much. I pretty much rotate between a couple different foods, one of which being your keto pods, and I'll you know, just keep it simple and just kind of substitute a few things throughout the week as I'm feeling, you know, curious to try something new, but nothing fancy by any means.
And you also cook. You have a recipe section on your website. I checked that out. So what can people expect from there?
So kind of, I mean, pretty basic. I don't try and get too fancy with it. I want it to be, I think one of people's biggest pushbacks with starting keto is they don't feel like they have the time to meal prep, or they don't have the time to, you know, go out and get the healthy ingredients. I mean, me personally, if I'm looking at an ingredient or a recipe and it's got, you know, 25 different ingredients and 30 different steps, like I'm probably not going to stick with that very often. So all of my recipes are pretty much less than 5 ingredients and very minimal steps necessary to get to the final product. And it's hopefully tasty in the end. Man, so is your food, I noticed you're more on the high carnivorous sort of style. Is that correct? Yeah, so I'm not like, you know, you get some people that are hardcore carnivore that they don't eat any vegetables. It's just all meat, no dairy, none of that. It's just strict carnivore. And I'm not so much like that. I keep my total carbs low, so by default, it winds up being more meat-based in my diet. But I mean, oftentimes, I like to view vegetables as a fat delivery system more than anything. So I'll saute some spinach or some asparagus with, you know, a bunch of other oils, or I'll cook them in with like a fatty cut of meat and basically just use it to soak up some of the, you know, saturated fats or monounsaturated fats. So I'm using like olive oil or something to cook with.
Okay. So what about your training style? Is there something unique about that? Or I want to open this can of worms.
All right, let's open it, man. So the training style, like a lot of people that train with me say that I train pretty intensely. Like I spent the past week with Keto Connect, and I worked out with them, and they said that I trained pretty intensely anyways. But my training style, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, do I change my style between like competition prep versus an off season? And the answer to that is no. Like I tend to stay pretty consistent with the training. I'll increase the cardio and I'll increase the intensity, but I try and lift as heavy as possible with good form throughout the year, because that's going to, you know, burn more calories. It's going to build more muscle. I'm a big advocate for training heavy and just training like a savage, man.
Is there any resource that you use to keep yourself chiseled on the latest knowledge, or some people that you like to follow?
So I like to just, there's definitely a paralysis analysis out there with the information in the World Wide Web. Like people, they get out there and they start looking at all this different source of information. They're less likely to jump in. So I've got a couple reputable sources I'll go to see what they're doing. But honestly, I spend more time just self-evaluating. Like I've been training for probably about 10 years now, and I've been keto for 3 of those. So I've gotten really in tune with how my body responds to certain things and why it's doing what it's doing. So like Danny Vega, he and I will do a bunch of self-experiments, and we'll just use that kind of as a test subject. That's the cool thing about keto. Like we're all guinea pigs right now. We're all cutting edge. There's not a whole bunch of research for how keto affects performance, long term. So it'll be interesting to see how we're all performing 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So honestly, it's mostly just diving in and seeing what the body reacts well to.
You're absolutely right. 2 good points you pointed out there. There's something called information overload that's happening these days. Way too much. And you can get into the rabbit hole of insanity if you want to. And then, of course, like you just said, we're at the edge of everything. You guys are pioneering the future. So,
yeah, which is it's cool. It's exciting. We're all in the forefront.
Do you use supplementation?
So I keep my supplements pretty minimal. I mean, I've cut my supplementation drastically since starting keto. I'll kind of hedge my bets and use a branched chain amino acid when I'm in a competition prep because I'll be at such a caloric deficit. I don't know if that's mandatory. There's a bunch of science coming out now that illustrates that it might not be. I'll use like a basic creatine monohydrate. There's quite a bit of science coming out that illustrates that's good for both the musculature and from like a neuron standpoint for brain cognition. So I incorporate that. But yeah, I don't really use any protein powders. I don't use any pre-workouts. Just a good, healthy, nutritious diet. That's all you need.
No caffeine, no buzz?
No, I drink coffee. I drink a lot of coffee. A lot of bulletproof coffees. I have, experimented with like just the caffeine pills. Most of the pre-workouts are loaded with caffeine, but they have a bunch of sweeteners that aren't really ideal for keto. So I always recommend people just spend, you can get a pre-workout that's got artificial sweeteners for $30. You can spend $6 and get a, bottle of 200, milligrams caffeine per pill. So that's always the better option there.
And you're creating something yourself. And we did a live stream on Instagram, and some people were saying, there's this thing called Keto Break. Dude, what is that?
Oh, so who'd you do a live stream with that came up?
Yeah, we do a live stream every Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning, and some people join us and they said, hey, Ketosavage is coming up with a keto brick. And we're like, okay, what's up with that?
So that was basically, I made that with my last competition prep, just kind of for myself as a way to get some more calorically dense quality foods in. And, I never thought anything of it. And then I, had it on my YouTube channel as I was documenting and showing people what I was eating. And there seemed to be a lot of interest around that. And people started asking me where they could get one or how they could make one. And then I'm like, well, shoot, maybe this is something to look into in the future. And then lo and behold, it's just grown and grown and grown into in the curiosity department. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to make this. So right now I'm actually in the process of getting, a commercial kitchen space set up. I've, incorporated a business. I'm getting all the, legal hoops jumped through from a, health department standpoint. And we're going to hopefully launch that in March. But basically it's 1,000 calories, shelf stable, 81.5% fat, no allergens, and it's just like a really good way to have a viable ketogenic friendly food product that you can take with you anywhere and not have to worry about the macros.
So does it have a flavor to it?
Yeah, there's not an official flavor. I guess if I had to put a name on it, I would say it's like a coffee chocolate mocha.
Okay. Sounds good.
There's such a thing.
All right. Good luck with that. Just let us know. We could always help you with push the stuff if you want. So here's an interesting question: there's this whole disparity between natural bodybuilding and not natural bodybuilding. What's your take on that sort of the world?
So there is a lot of disparity there, and a lot of people, I don't know, I think bodybuilding gets a bad rap because of that. Because, I mean, the people that are competing at the Mr. Olympia, that are walking around at, 180 pounds at sub-percent body fat. I mean, that's not natural as a human being. They're on, open about that. Then there's, and you have to be natural for 7 years. You have to go through a polygraph test. You have to have a urinalysis. And it's much different. The concept of, putting in the work is the same. A lot of people don't respect the enhanced bodybuilders because they say it's all just drugs, which is far from the truth. They have to put in a lot of work as well. But for me personally, I just want to see what my body's capable of naturally. So I'm just pushing it as hard as I can to see what I can truly do with myself without the enhancements, and take it from there. But I still have utmost respect for people that have opted to, go the enhanced route.
Okay. So you said that you don't really do like a bulk or cut, or do you do a bulk or cut on keto?
So I used, not so much with keto. I used to do like a traditional bulk and cut. Like I got up to 230 pounds and the first time I competed, not really know what I was doing, and cut down to like 150 in 3 months time. But I lost a lot of muscle in the process, so I don't recommend that. Now I tend to keep it pretty lean year round and then just get leaner for competition. Like I'll tend to spend 4 or 5 months in competition prep, and like my off season body fat percentage will range between 8 and 12% body fat. And then as I go into a competition prep, I'll taper that down to about, like last competition, I was down to 3.5% body fat, but that's not sustainable year round. So I'll increase it a little bit in the off season.
Okay. Do you have a favorite exercise or two that you just have fallen in love with?
Man, squats and deadlift all the way. There's no better exercises. Like if I had to pick two, those would be it. A lot of people don't do them because they're hard, but usually the hardest things are the ones that need to be incorporated the most.
What about cardio?
So cardio, I keep it pretty simple. I just do Stairmaster. I feel like that's less taxing on the joints. It's easy to manipulate. I'll just plug in like a YouTube video or a podcast or an audiobook, put my head down on the Stairmaster and get to work. And then it's over in 20 minutes. You're going to burn like twice as many calories doing that as opposed to trying to do an hour long on the treadmill or something.
Okay. So this is just, the next question is just out of my curiosity. So you're about 2 months away from your competition. How's the story like till the competition?
So the competition, it's funny, man. Like people don't really understand the sport of bodybuilding. It's from the outside looking in, you get a bunch of guys wearing a thong, posing on stage. What the hell's going on with that? But it's a mental sport, it's an individual sport. Like the mental battle that you go through, especially in those last 2 months. I mean, that's the kind of adversity that makes you capable of so much more in life, and it flows into all other aspects of life, not just the sport itself, but everything. And like those last 2 months, it's hard to even put into words, especially like the last month. The last month, there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of confidence, there's a lot of conflicting emotions, and you just want to be the best that you could be. You're at a caloric deficit. You're always hungry. I mean, you're tapering your calories slowly, and you're being so consistent with it. You're not allowed to give in to the temptations that you have with regard to food. And you have to say no. You have to sacrifice to so many things in life. And, you can't miss the gym days. You can't miss the meals. It's just it's a brutal process. But, stepping off stage when it's all said and done, knowing that you gave it your all, there's nothing else to compare with that. Okay.
And what about training frequency? How often do you train, or does that keep changing?
So I pretty much spend 6 days a week in the gym. When you're in a competition prep, you spend a lot more time doing cardio and like working on your posing, which is pretty exhausting in itself. And the training's always there. So I'll typically spend, 2 hours in the gym training, and then I'll do 20-minute sessions on the Stairmaster. So a lot of time in the gym for sure. A lot of time in the gym, some time in the kitchen, some time meditating to make sure I stay sane throughout the whole process.
You got a special meditation routine going on?
I'm pretty lazy with it in the off season, to be honest. I need to get better. But yeah, during the competition prep, I try and, wake up, have like, my coffee, and then just sit there. I was using that app. There's an app called Calm, and there's an app called Headspace, and I was using both of those to kind of figure out which one I liked more, just to kind of chisel out 10 minutes of my day before the chaos starts where I can kind of get in the right headspace. yeah, I would try and do that as often as possible.
I've noticed that people who get into Headspace, they do it for 2 months and then just fizzle out. Gets a little difficult.
Yeah, it is weird. It's I don't know, like the reason I was able to stick with it so consistently with like a competition prep and less so in the off season, I think, is because it becomes much more apparent how much you need it when times are tough. You know, like in the off season, I'm not as strict with my macro tracking. I'm not as strict with everything. So I'm able to just kind of mentally relax and recharge without the Headspace app, without the meditation. But in a competition prep, it's like everything is pushed to the limit, and you realize that your emotions start slipping, your control over things starts slipping. So it becomes apparent how much you need that 10-minute meditation block. And then you start fighting for it because you don't want to lose that, you know?
You mentioned something about poses just a minute or so ago. How do people learn that, or where can they begin? Like, just a regular guy, I mean, what's going on over there?
So I learned all of mine pretty much from YouTube initially, just kind of watching YouTube. And then as you get farther and farther into the sport, you find other people that have done it before, and they'll help you out. The first competition I'd ever done, like 1 week before I stepped on stage, I was doing cardio, and then I ran across somebody that was, competitor. And I just asked him, "Hey man, I got a show in a week. What can you show me? Can you take a look at me and see if I'm, on track, or if I'm way off base here?" And he helped me out. And then, just kind of progresses from there. So the more you get into it, though, the more you kind of practice it and kind of see what works for your body and your body type, and then you get constructive criticism for other competitors and the judges, and you just keep refining it and honing it in over the years.
And what's your life outside of training like? Is there something special that you make sure you do? Is there some routine that you follow? Like, I need to watch 10 movies outside of training or something like that?
That's a good question. So I don't even have a TV. I love to read and I love the outdoors. I like to hunt and fish, but honestly, since I've started Ketosavage, that's pretty much become my all-consuming thing, the machine that I just pour myself into. If I'm not training, then I'm, podcasting, or I'm working on client macros, or I'm doing an interview, or I'm working on a website article, or I'm shooting a YouTube video. Like that's 100% of my time from 4 o'clock until 10 o'clock. I'm either training or doing that.
Oh man. Entrepreneurial life, man. We're feeling the same buzz over here, working 12, 16 hours per day. Do you get like no time to enjoy or relax at all? Are you just going guns blazing?
It's kind of funny. Like people always stress balance and finding balance in life, but I guess this is totally individualized basis, but I don't believe in balance. Like I'm an extremist, like I would rather be really freaking good at my craft, be the best at my craft, than trying to find balance and be subpar at many different things. And the cool thing about being an entrepreneur and working on a business that, you're truly passionate about is it's self-priming. It's energizing in itself. Like it doesn't drain me. Like I don't need to go watch a movie or go relax and do something different outside of the business, because the business itself is relaxing. Even as hard as I'm working, it's still, my relaxation.
And that is so true. I think I can relate it to that, because I think one of the most boring things you can do is sit in front of the ocean for 8 hours doing nothing. But somehow some people seem to enjoy that activity. So more power to them.
It's funny, man. Like I can totally relate with you, and you're doing your own thing as well. But it's interesting to talk with people that aren't working on their own thing, that are working for the other man. And they're just, like, that's all they know. It's much, there's like a separation there. Like we're not speaking the same language, and it becomes more and more apparent the deeper I get into the world of, business ownership and entrepreneurialism. But it's cool to be able to find people like yourself that I can relate with. And I mean, I don't know, like you understand what it's like to work 16, 17 hours on your thing. Like that's something that few people can understand.
And the reality is, like you were saying, it's a lot of fun because you're just constantly switching tasks. You're going from one thing to another, and that keeps things really fresh. But if you're working in a cubicle or a honeycomb, as I call it, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, and you're not even directly connected to the results that the company's obtaining. So I can really see how that could be a burnout, and your life is so terrible that 8 hours in front of the ocean is the best thing that could happen in the entire year. So
yeah,
that's
exactly, man.
Yeah, exactly.
It's when you're able to see how the tasks at hand are going to shape what's seen at the end of the day, it makes you that much more motivated to give everything you can in the day.
How's your family taking all of this?
My family, I come from, that's a very interesting question, man. So part of my family is very entrepreneurial. Like my uncle, he's built his own business. My cousins have built their own business, so they can understand and totally respect it. My parents, they've raised me to, be self-sufficient and to work really hard. Like I've gotten my work ethic from my parents, so they appreciate the work that I'm putting in. But they, especially my dad, like he doesn't understand what I'm doing. Like he's kind of the generation where, you work hard, you go to college, you get a degree, then you get yourself locked into a career and you have a retirement, you have a pension. That's just what he does, and that's so far removed from my day to day and the life that I'm structuring for myself. So he appreciates and respects what I'm doing and that I'm working hard on something and that I'm finding fulfillment in it, but he doesn't understand any of the business concepts or what the bigger picture is.
And I think that's the new generation, the college days, the college years, and then getting a job, that sort of lifestyle. I think that's antiquated. If everybody else has a college degree, I think the value of the college degree sort of goes down. And then with all the culture that's changing, which could be a whole new topic for another podcast, I think the drive towards entrepreneurship and just going out there to get what you want, I think that's the future.
Yeah, I agree. I had this conversation with an older gentleman the other day, and they were of the mind that you still needed a college degree, and they're kind of like, if everybody's got a bachelor's degree, then the next thing up is to get a master's degree, right? Like you have to have a master's degree to be competitive now, and I think it's going the exact other way. Like some industries, obviously, like if you're going to be a doctor or something like that, you have to have that schooling, but there's so much more, leverage in having skills. Not necessarily having like a formal document that says that you've graduated. Like companies now are going to put more weight in a 15-year-old kid that's able to redesign a website and engage in social media than they are somebody that doesn't know how to even log on to Facebook but has a college degree.
Yeah, and that's just been how it is. And whenever I have a conversation with Corey, he's with me on Ketogeek, and we're thinking, hey, how do we expand Ketogeek? What kind of people do we need to bring on board? And it goes back to the same thing, is we really don't want someone, we're not looking for a college degree. We're looking for someone to help us solve a problem in the world. That's what we're looking for. And considering how certain subjects or degrees are just a bit of a brainwashing, in my personal opinion, it sometimes can be a negative thing to have a degree. So that's what I'm noticing.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And it totally flies in the face of what we're told and raised to believe. But at the same time, so does the ketogenic diet. Like we're not supposed to eat high fat. Like we're just totally contrarian, but it's working. So if it works, I oftentimes look at what the masses are doing and look the exact opposite direction to see where I'm going to find my success. And it's worked out so far.
Yeah. Do you think, just to go back to the bodybuilding world, do you think there's a slight or any advantage for bodybuilders in general to go into a ketogenic diet? I think you mentioned hunger levels might be lower, or is there anything else beyond that?
So, speaking strictly from natural bodybuilding perspective, because like a lot of the enhanced bodybuilders, the rules are going to be a little different for them. Some of them are injecting insulin, which is going to kind of rule out the whole ketogenic diet. But from a natural bodybuilding perspective, one of the things that I noticed, and I'm speaking based off of my experience before starting keto versus now, when you get to a really low caloric deficit and you're tapering your fat down to minimal fat intake and your protein stays high, but your carbs are kind of dropping pretty low as well, what's happening basically is your body's inefficiently converting, proteins to glucose through gluconeogenesis. And that's why, it's a very inefficient process. That's why a lot of competitors kind of walk around like zombies there towards the end. And, the testosterone, their hormones start getting out of whack because, if you're a male, cholesterol is the precursor to testosterone. If you've got your fats way down low, then your hormones are going to get jacked up. So that's a negative there. What I noticed with keto is that my hormones stayed, even keel. I was still hungry, like I was still at enough deficit to be hungry the whole time, but my mental clarity never really started slipping because, my ketones were elevated. They kept getting higher and higher throughout my contest prep. So I felt sharper and sharper as I went, as opposed to foggier and foggier. And then as it relates to peak week, a lot of competitors will, have like a really high surplus carb refeed day the day before the show. They'll oftentimes, manipulate their water intake, basically deplete all their water intake, and then, try and hyperhydrate or totally deplete that with, diuretics. It's just a very unhealthy process. Like there was one competitor that had to walk off stage when I was posing with him because his chest started cramping so much because he was so dehydrated, and I didn't have to do any of those negative repercussions. I was drinking, I had a gallon of water before I stepped on stage because without glycogen in my system from the carbs, there was no water retention.
Okay, so how could one person begin their bodybuilding journey from ground zero? Like, for example, one day I get the epiphany, I want to become a bodybuilder. I want to look like that Superman in my comic book. What do I do?
So don't be paralyzed by all the information out there. You just need to get into the gym and lift some weights. Even if you're having bad form with some of the movements, like you're still going to be engaged in muscles that you haven't engaged before, and you're going to see some growth. A lot of people put on, considerable amount of muscle their first year simply because they're stimulating the muscle in a way they never had before. Just start. And, you can refine the process as you go. You can look on YouTube for forums on how to do different exercises. That's how I started on how to do everything. As it relates to nutrition, you have to just experiment, self-experimentation, kind of figure out what you're doing. I'm obviously biased towards keto now, so I would recommend people use that as their bodybuilding type nutritional protocol. They could definitely look for information on reputable bodybuilding ketogenic sites like ketosavage.com. Listen to my podcast. But yeah, most anything, man, just, jump in it, learn as you go, figure out what works, and just be in tune with your body. Like, people are so hesitant to start things because they want to have it perfect. And one thing I've learned in bodybuilding and in business and in everything, relationships, you just have to learn as you go and not be afraid to start.
What about women? Is there something different about them as far as training, nutrition, and keto and bodybuilding is concerned?
So women, I've noticed amongst my clients, they're going to respond on average much more slowly than men from like a weight loss perspective. And I think that's mostly hormone related. Plus, women having their monthly cycle, that tends to skew things quite a bit with regard to water retention. So they have to just kind of be more. I think a good piece of advice for women would be just to, be patient. The same applies to men too, but, oftentimes have, married couples or couples sign up together and the man will drop a lot more weight more quickly and then the women will get all discouraged. But they just have to dig in and plan on being, in ketosis and plan for the long game. Because like I said at the beginning, the longer you're adapted, the more efficient your body gets. It seems to take a little bit longer for women to tap into that potential, but it's going to happen. They just have to keep pushing.
Okay. And have you noticed some sort of mistakes that people make when they get into bodybuilding combined with keto?
So honestly, there's not a whole lot of bodybuilders in keto that I know of yet, but of the ones I do, one of the common mistakes is the macronutrient ratios. A lot of people assume that since they're trying to build muscle, they need significantly more protein than fat. And that's just not the case with keto. Like I got down to, like I said, 65 grams of protein towards the end of my contest prep. Of course, I was in a deficit, and I was cutting body fat. But if you're trying to build muscle, you still don't need near as much protein as is recommended to traditional bodybuilding type diets. I recommend having a higher gram count for fat than protein at all times, whether you're bulking or cutting.
Got it. Yeah, that seems to be a bit of a controversial issue. Protein is just the most controversial macro of all, alongside carbs and fats, and it's all just a crazy mess. So What are some of the things that you're noticing as far as the bodybuilding world is concerned? Are there any certain changes that are happening that are in the horizon? And how's the sport faring these days?
I think, I don't know, it's interesting to see how it kind of is going to hopefully change with keto becoming more popular. Like one of my, hopes is that, I can lead by example. I can have other competitors that I'm training lead by example. Other people that are just doing it on their own can lead by example. But I truly do believe that a ketogenic bodybuilding approach is much, much healthier than what's been used in the past. And I think the more people that have success with that as a protocol and illustrate that it works, hopefully the more interest will gather around doing that as the typical bodybuilding protocol. But currently, it's just like bodybuilding as a industry is going to fight keto, all the way through, because they're so adamant about having carbohydrates, and keto is a very stark contrast to that. And then you also add in the whole protein variable, and that's another layer of complexity. So honestly, I'm just excited that keto is gaining so much in popularity right now, and then with that, hopefully it'll bleed into the bodybuilding space, and hopefully competitors will see that there's another viable alternative out there that's much better for them and their health.
So what can people expect when they get coaching from you? What kind of style do you have?
So I take a pretty involved approach. I mean, I've got I have daily interaction with my clients, which I don't know of too many other coaches that offer daily communication, but I change the macros on a weekly basis, and I perform better with a higher fat ratio, but I'm not ever going to say that that's going to be the case for everybody. So I tend to, treat everybody as an individual and see, they might perform better with a higher protein ratio. So I get them set up. I use a software called Slack to communicate with them, and, I have them fill out a questionnaire. Then I have a conference call with them. We go through all the details of what they've done in the past, what they want to do going forward, figure out what their goals are. And then we kind of figure out what their protein thresholds are, what their carb thresholds are, which I keep all my clients pretty low with the carbs, because that's kind of just seen as noise in the equation, in my opinion, if strict keto is the goal. And then we figure out what the fat ratio threshold is for them, and then we just kind of manipulate the variables slowly and steadily over time to figure out what their body performs best at.
Okay. And you also have a podcast. What can people expect from that?
So my podcast is super chill. Like, I don't ever go in with a scripted podcast. I don't ever have like a planned list of questions. I just kind of go back and forth with whoever the guest is. We talk about their life, their story, their goals, what they're working on, what they're excited about. If it's, sometimes I have doctors on there and we'll go into the weeds about the science behind, the new and upcoming research. Sometimes I'll have, somebody that's starting a new keto business, for instance, and we'll just kind of dive into some of the details behind that. I had one guy on that wasn't even keto, but he, was a veteran and had like paralyzed and flatlined twice on the operating table, and then, recovered from that, became a TEDx speaker, and he and I talked about mindset and motivation. So that was one of the popular episodes as well.
Yeah, it seems like you're high on that motivation aspect of it. Do you have a book recommendation or anything that people can look for so that they can get a kick in the ass?
Yeah, I am high on it's not even so much the motivation so much as just the mentality. Like, I feel, and I think all that's been spurred from the struggles that I've dealt with through bodybuilding and how that's kind of bled into all aspects of my life. But every success I've seen thus far has been a result of just, the mentality that comes with going through something hard and being stoic in the moment. So the books that I would recommend, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. It's all about stoicism, and that's been a game changer. I have that on repeat on audiobook every time I do a competition prep.
Okay. And what are some of the things that you've learned from interviewing so many different people? Like, you just mentioned one story, but is there some things that were really aha moments or wow or any of those kind of things?
That's a really good question. Let's see here. As it relates to keto, one of the common recurring themes is just to, have a lifestyle perspective and approach to using the diet, which, seems pretty simple and high level, but a lot of people don't have that. And it's surprising the number of people that don't. Like, they just want to get into the diet for, some quick fat loss, some quick weight loss, but that's kind of setting themselves up for failure. I think, all the research and science coming out that illustrates how the diet can be used for the long term, and then like all the mental and the performance and the physical benefits that come with getting into that next stage of adaptation with the diet, staying strict with it for the long term. I think that's the main overarching theme there, is just to have a lifestyle perspective and approach to using the ketogenic diet and planning on being patient and staying with it for the long haul.
Yeah. And what are some of the things that you think have changed since the last 2-3 years since you have started keto? Some things that you can think off the top of the head.
It's just blown up in popularity, honestly. Like, there's so much more hype around it now than when I first started. It's a lot more mainstream. I mean, it might not be mainstream and everybody doing it, but it's mainstream and everybody at least knowing about it or having heard about it or knowing somebody that's doing it. And with that hype, you're getting a lot more companies coming in to try and, take advantage of that interest and leverage that community to make some money, which is good. I'm a capitalist at heart. I'm all about business and growth, and the market will decide what's quality and what's not. But you're getting a lot of, companies that are trying to play on the ignorance of some of these people just starting in the diet, which is kind of sad to see. But I guess that's unfortunately part of, some ways of business as well. So that's the negative, I guess.
Yeah. Well, here's a fun question, and you don't have to answer it, but how can you tell if someone is natty or not?
No, it's a good question. It's honestly kind of hard, especially like the people that are at the very, very top of the sport, like on the pro IFBB level, like they're not natty, and they'll openly say they're not natty. The people that are, kind of middle of the road, it's definitely harder to know if they're natty or not. And some people that don't even look like they're bodybuilders aren't natty. So it's really hard. Like when I'm dialed in for competition, people assume that I'm not natural. So honestly, you can't really I don't try and spend much time wondering if they are or not. Like I try and take people at their word. If they tell me they are, then I trust them for it. And if they're not, then, oh, well, with bodybuilding being an individual sport and it being, trying to be the better you that you can be, I just focus on me and knowing that I'm natural. And if the competitor is great, if he isn't, great. I hope that with me competing in the natural divisions, all the competitors I'm competing against are also natural. There's been some dishonesty there, which is unfortunate, but I can't control who I'm on stage with, so I just have to be the best I can be with it.
How do they wiggle around the rules, or what do they do?
So most of the natural bodybuilding competitions, they have like a polygraph, and then they have a urinalysis test. So like if somebody's not natural, I don't know how they weasel out of a polygraph test, but some people are able to do that. And then, with it being just a urinalysis test, they're able to kind of time their intake so they can cycle off of whatever enhanced drugs they're using early enough that it wouldn't be in your system.
Okay. Well, bodybuilding. Is there any sport that could benefit through bodybuilding by any chance, or some sport that could potentially benefit bodybuilding itself?
So yeah, bodybuilding, it's I don't know, like what I've done and what I've been able to build with bodybuilding is carried over into just being simply more physically active. I'm going to be a better, basketball player, a better, football player or anything simply because of what I've, been able to do with bodybuilding. Bodybuilding, you're going to be taxing your muscles and pushing them both from a strength and stamina standpoint harder than they've ever been pushed before, and that's going to carry over to every other aspect of life. And kind of to hinge on what we were saying earlier about me putting so much emphasis on the mentality. Like if you're learning and adapting to be able to push your mind harder with each and every set, each and every rep, each and every day in the gym, that's going to become evident during that last quarter of whatever game or whatever sport you're playing. You're going to have that extra push and drive necessary to see it through to the finish.
All right. Do you always go to failure?
I always go to failure on the last set. I typically do like 4 sets with like a 15, 12, 10, 8 rep range, and I'll, progressively increase the weight with each set. So the first couple sets are kind of more just to prime the muscle, loosen up the joints for that specific movement, and then from there I'll go to failure and push myself, and oftentimes do drop sets and supersets. And I don't know, it's interesting. There's always like a there's some science that says that you shouldn't do that. There's some science that says all about the volume. Some say, lighter reps or lighter weight, higher reps. But for me, it's honestly, I want to be able to just walk out of the gym knowing I didn't leave anything in the tank. So even if I'm sacrificing, total volume by going to failure on some of those sets, I want to be able to feel the way I feel, knowing that I couldn't have done another rep if I'd wanted to.
Sounds good. Man, we've knocked out quite a bit of topics. You're like a machine gun as far as talking is concerned.
Hey, man, you're a machine gun with the questions. I have to be able to rapid fire them back.
Do you think there's any sort of misconceptions about training, some myths that exist in the bodybuilding world that you think need not to be there?
One of the common ones that I see a lot in probably the general public is the whole concept. Overtraining is much harder to do than people realize. And they'll oftentimes use that as an excuse to not go to the gym, which is unfortunate because they're afraid they're going to be overtraining. But that's oftentimes not the case. Just get in the gym and doing so and going harder than you think is necessary is good. Like some typical ones with like squat form, for instance, one of my pet peeves is to see people load the weight up on the bar down the movement. They're not doing themselves any favors there. They need to put lighter weight on the bar and get the full range of motion and go heavy, but not sacrifice the form and the movement. That's one big mistake I see a lot of people make.
Is that whole focus on form and movement really important, or is it just important to get things up in the air?
No, it's definitely important. Just to use the squat for an example there, I train, when I'm doing squats, I'll go all the way down and I'll bottom out. And some people say that that's taxing on my knees, but I've never had a knee injury and my knees feel totally fine. And I'm engaging much more muscle fibers by going that full range of motion. I'm getting my quads, my hamstrings, my glutes. And for the people that aren't even going parallel, they're not really engaging any of those hamstrings or glutes. So, having form is critical. What I try to do is I'll have, certain sets where I'll go super heavy. I'll have a little bit of sloppier form just so I can engage some of those deep muscle tissue fibers. And then I'll do another set with lighter weight and much more strict form so I can engage the fiber from top to bottom of the movement. So I try to hedge my bets, so to speak, with regards to that. But yeah, form is definitely important. You don't want to injure yourself.
Sounds good. Do we have any other topics that we need to cover, or have we just banged everything out?
Man, I want to talk about Ketogeek. Turn the tables here. Ask you some questions.
Well, do you have questions here, or what do you want to do?
What's? I guess I didn't have you on my podcast. I'll just ask you in further detail. But I would be curious to know kind of what your big picture is. What's your motivation behind doing it in the first place? Oh, by the way, Crystal wanted me to tell you that she loves your product. She's just sad because I always eat them before she gets to.
Hey, fight for it. We'll keep sending you guys more. But yeah, man, Ketogeek, I started this mainly because I wanted to end a lot of these chronic conditions in the world and make this world a better place. And at the same time, empower people like good educators in the world and help them become exponentially more influential, provide products to suit this sort of lifestyle. So there's a big infrastructure that I wanted to build over here, but mostly just to make things better. That was my goal. So that's basically Ketogeek, man.
And what, when did you start? How long has it been up and running?
We've been doing Ketogeek for about a year and a half, basically. That's been the hardcore work that we've been doing. We've been mostly focused on the education component, like this podcast, rather than pushing our products too much. So yeah, it's been a fun journey.
Like it, man. I definitely, it's interesting. The longer you're in this space, in this niche, in this industry, you're able to kind of see who's jumping into it just to make a short buck versus the people that are kind of there for the long game and actually care about the other people that are in the space. And I don't know, man, I get a good vibe from you for sure. I like your style, the way you're going about things. I respect what you're doing for sure.
And you hit the nail right on top of the head. I find it very difficult to work with people whose philosophies I can't align with. And this podcast is a direct representation of what kind of people that we want to work with. And that sounds brutal, but it's true, because the people that get this microphone are usually people that I really respect in general. Mm-hmm. I might disagree with them on certain topics, but overall, I think they're on the right in the right direction, or at least they have the intention right. I think that's very important, because like you just said, some people just want to jump onto this bandwagon of keto, sell a product without knowing what exactly it is, how it can benefit a certain specific person. And that's why it took us some time to actually push our products rather than just shoving it down last year.
And that's 100% the right way to go about it. Like, if you're going to be way ahead of the game doing what you're doing and kind of putting more emphasis on quality over quantity. And it's not always easy to do that in the short term, but it all pays itself forward. And you're on the right track, man. So I encourage you to keep doing exactly.
Thank you, good sir. So yeah, I think we've pretty much nailed a lot of things down. But if you have any last few topics, we can definitely put them up here. If not, we can move forward to the plugs.
That's pretty much it, man. I just wanted to, encourage people to, whether sport is bodybuilding or whatever it is, whether they just want to get in a diet to be healthy for the long term, simply diving into the space and, going full swing forward and, learning as they go. That's the one piece of advice that I can impart on people, just to, trust the process, play for the long game, and be the best they can be on the day to day.
And I agree with that. And how can people find you?
So my website is ketosavage.com. That's my Instagram's Ketosavage. My, everything with me is Ketosavage podcast. I'm working on that Keto Brick, and that's going to have its own website. So when it goes live in March, it'll be ketobrick.com.
Okay, so Ketosavage on Instagram, I know. You're also on YouTube. You have a website, and Keto Break is eventually going to come on its own website. All right, fantastic. Robert, you have been quite a blast to talk with. If there's anything we can do to help you in your future endeavors, please let me know, and we will do that.
It sounds good to me, so I appreciate the opportunity to be on here.
Thank you for listening to the show. You can visit us at ketogeek.com to check out our premium, keto-friendly, and low-carb food products, including our infamous energy pods, made from the best ingredients we could find in the entire country. We also recommend signing up for our newsletter at ketogeek.com/signup, where you get exclusive discounts, rewards, product announcements, and the latest content we are working on. You also get a 10% discount on your entire order when you sign up. Go to ketogeek.com/signup to join the low-carb playground.